So Zach, Rondot and Grayson McKinney, they're authors of The Expert Effect, a three-part system to break down the walls of your classroom and connect your students to the world. Hopefully with kindness, right?
Of course.
That's right.
All right, it's got to be a part. It's got to be a part of it.
And I just want to
Welcome.
say it's such an honor to be here and to get to hear from Rana. My class has been reading her books for years. In fact, we've used one of her books, What Does It Mean to Be Present, as a whole school lesson on mindfulness and something that we value highly at Costello Elementary School in Troy, Michigan. So
that's awesome. We'll make sure that she knows that. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours, and you can take it away.
Great, thank you very much. Just share our screen really quick. All right, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see that, or just let us know?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect.
We're all Zoom experts at this point, so.
Everybody is a Zoom expert.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so like you mentioned, I'm Zach Rondo.
And I'm Grayson McKinney.
And we are here, and we're really excited to talk about this book that we wrote and published. It came out last May, called The Expert Effect, and it's a three-part system to break down the walls of your classroom and connect your students to the world. So we're going to jump right into it.
I'll just introduce myself a little bit more. I'm a fifth grade teacher, but I've taught all of the grade levels from like about 3 through 6. So I live in the upper elementary range. And like I said, I'm at Costello Elementary School in Troy, Michigan. To connect with me after today's session, I'm very active on Twitter. You can follow me at gmckinney2. And recently on Instagram, we created an account for our book and have been interacting with people all around the world at Expert Effect EDU.
And yeah, I'm a fourth grade teacher at Costello. We teach right down the hall from each other on Twitter at Mr. Rondo or at Zach Rondo. And just a small warning, if you hear any loud noises, we are like this wall behind us. The cafeteria is on the other side, and it is lunch at our school right now. So just putting that out there.
So like we said, we're elementary teachers, and we've taught together for the last 8 or so years. And since 2015, we've been going around to educational conferences and sharing the experiences that we've had as teachers, always trying to push the boundaries, always trying to push the envelope of what's possible to accomplish in the elementary school setting. And our goal has been to inspire fellow teachers near and far to kind of learn from our mistakes and learn from our successes. And that's actually kind of where our book idea came from. It's about breaking down the walls of our classroom so that the classroom teacher is not the only expert that kids are learning from. We want them learning from outside experts and making those community connections. We want them to become experts in their own right, following their passions through project-based learning. And then we want to give them the opportunity to teach others outside of the classroom and make their work that they do in school meaningful by presenting to authentic audiences around the world. So if we've got any educators in the audience today, hopefully we'll be able to share some of those success stories and inspire you to think about what's possible inside the classroom.
So as always, we want to start with why. So the way this kind of connects with this conference is that we've read and heard, the single problem plaguing all students in schools everywhere is a crisis of disconnection. So when we believe that when students are more connected to their learning, the kind of behavior problems and discipline things that we all have to deal with start to take care of themselves in a little bit of that way too. So we're here to talk about how we can connect our students' learning to make them a more engaged student in school, which makes them want to be at school more, and it makes everything easier for us in the classroom as teachers. Okay. So a few predictions. I'm not going to read everything on this screen, but we are living in this world where we don't really know what the future holds for our students. I teach fourth grade, so I have 9 and 10-year-olds in my classroom, and by the time they enter the workforce, it's going to look a lot different than it even does today. And these statistics illustrate that. So our thought again is to teach how can we connect our students with their learning so it makes them want to be lifelong learners for whatever they face.
One statistic that really stands out to me is that by 2030, so that's not too far away, less than a decade, 85% of the jobs that they'll be fulfilling won't have even been invented yet, or they'll be solving problems that we haven't recognized, and they'll be using technologies that haven't been developed. So what they're going to be coming into as they leave our classrooms is quite different from the world that we entered as we left school years ago. And so you could sum it up like this. David Warlick says, for the first time in history, we're preparing kids for a world that we can't clearly define. And we can't do that alone as classroom teachers. It takes those community connections.
And if you don't believe us, here's a guy named Keith Bronny, who since 2017 has made a living translating emojis, because different emojis mean different things for different cultures and different languages. So that's always got to throw that one in there.
Certainly was not an option for my major in college. But when we think about what school used to prepare people for, it was to go out of school and be a complacent worker, to find a good paying, livable wage at a factory job on the assembly line where they do a repetitive task over and over again. That's what school used to prepare people for, and in many ways, school hasn't changed all that much. Now we're preparing kids for completely different work environments and societal arrangements. So in our book, we try to emphasize the point that it's time that we stop teaching what we call the YouTube generation for an assembly line world that no longer exists.
All right, so a quick pop quiz here. In this classroom, traditional classroom, who do you think the smartest person in the room is when you're looking at it? Yes, the teacher is going to be the smartest person in this room. And I remember being in school thinking that my teachers were the smartest people in the world and that they had all the answers to everything. Well, in this classroom with these students, I'll give you a hint who the smartest person in the room is. It's not me. And that is because we have these devices here, and that Google and Siri and YouTube will beat us every single time. So our role as teachers has changed from that storehouse of knowledge in the front of the classroom to facilitating deep learning experiences, and that's how we try to look at this.
Right. So basically, our goal, and the thing that Zach mentioned, can kind of help make students feel connected to school, help them build relationships, not only with people in the classroom, but then also see their place in this larger society. We want to give them the chance to learn from, become, and teach others like experts. And in doing this, we're increasing the rigor of their learning. We're building those all-important relationships. We're making the content that we're charged with teaching more relevant. And we're going to share some awesome results, some examples of how this has happened in our classrooms over the past few years. So the first part is getting our students to make those connections. We're acting like an agent, putting our client in touch with the right people at the right time in order for them to learn the most meaningful lessons. So we want our students learning from experts near and far.
So as we went through this 2-year process of writing the book, and we were sharing the title, The Expert, it came to be that some people were thinking, there's all these headlines out there that there's no experts, there's no such thing as an expert. So we knew that we had to define expert for our context. And when we talk about getting experts, we're not talking about getting the #1 most world-renowned experts. We also love acronyms, so we created one. And in our definition, what we're looking for in an expert to connect with our students is someone who's experienced, someone who is exciting to talk to kids. It's purposeful. We're not just getting some expert to talk to us, but it actually connects to the curriculum. It empowers our students to think about this. It's a real person who's doing this work in their real life. And most importantly, they know how to talk to kids. We've had those experiences where we bring some people in that don't have the experience of talking to kids.
We had to cheat a little bit on the X, but this is our go-to checklist to ask ourselves, is this going to be a good experience, a positive, worthwhile experience for our kids or not? So a couple of examples of this, a lot of these pictures are from pre-COVID, but we're slowly kind of getting back into it. And now, of course, since we're all experts in Zoom, it's been easier than ever to find those experts and have them connect remotely because it's less of an inconvenience for them. It's more time convenient for you to fit it into the class. It maybe takes up a little bit less time. But here are a couple examples. One of my 5th graders were learning about journalism, and I'm not a journalist, just recently an author, but not by any means a newspaper reporter. I wanted them to learn what it would take to be a journalist from the people who actually knew. So we had a couple of experts in our community. Carrie Birmingham is our communications director at the Troy School District, who is actually also an Emmy award-winning journalist. So we invited her to come in and talk about, what kind of person makes a good journalist. And her answer of somebody who's always curious, that really piqued kids' excitement and interest in this career. We also reached out to local newspapers. We got very lucky one day with this reporter who was writing more in-depth columns. He brought in little steno pads or little notepads for our kids to feel like actual journalists, and brought in some newspaper articles that he himself had written. So again, we're looking for those opportunities where people have real experience and can be the best teachers.
And just one more example from here. My favorite one that we've ever done is right in the middle. That's Kevin Jeans, who is the meteorologist for Channel 7 News. So our teaching partner, Amanda Oliver, reached out to him and asked if he would consider Skyping in as we were doing a unit on extreme weather. And to our surprise, he responded, "I would rather just come into school if that's possible next week." So it's a lot easier to make these connections, but people, again, in a time where we can have visitors back into our classroom, in-person ones are always great to have in, but we have many examples of virtual ones. So another one of these examples I'll share is right in the middle of this. The guy on the TV, we were studying Michigan and the tourism industry. And if you live in Michigan, and often people who live outside of Michigan, but in the United States, are familiar with the Pure Michigan campaign, because those commercials go out nationwide to try to draw tourism. So I emailed about 7 people to try to get somebody from that campaign to come talk to our students. And the first 6 were too busy or didn't reply. But on the 7th try, we got this guy from the Pure Michigan campaign to Skype in with us, teach us all of the facts and the importance of Michigan's tourism industry, which I can promise was way more fun and exciting than our outdated Michigan textbooks.
Right, and so we say Skype an expert. Obviously, we've been doing this since Skype was the #1 player in the game, but obviously Zoom has taken over, Microsoft Teams, FaceTime, if it's a personal connection. There's a million different opportunities. And whether it's a famous author, like this year already, we've connected with Alan Gratz, one of our favorite authors, the author of the Wings of Fire series, all kinds of different, Rick Riordan. We're always looking for opportunities to make kids excited to come to school, excited for the next expert that they're going to learn from. And it kind of makes them feel valued. It makes them feel like they are worthy of learning from these important people. So if you're a teacher interested in looking for it and wanting to, try to book some of these expert experiences for yourself, there's a couple of great places to look. One is the Center for Interactive Learning and Collaboration, CILC. Some of those are free, some of them are paid. Flipgrid has started creating a lot of live opportunities for teachers to bring in lots of people. Last year, we got to hear from Sharon Robinson, who is one of the daughters of Jackie Robinson, the civil rights leader and baseball player. So some amazing opportunities. Skype a Scientist is great for any science. They've got scientists of all different backgrounds. And of course, there's all kinds of authors who are willing to do this too, as we just saw Rana Diorio and Kate Messner.
All right, and one important thing about this is don't be afraid to ask. People love helping educators. We have the best product in the world. We have kids. We're not like, I know it feels uncomfortable when we first started doing this, emailing people and asking for things, but people are really willing to do it, is what we have found.
All right, so once you've gotten the kids to learn from you as the classroom expert, and then also those outside community helpers, we like to have students become experts in their own right by taking on what's called project-based learning, or PBL. So why is it so important to give students the chance to become experts in this way, rather than just taking multiple choice tests and quizzes, or just filling in worksheets? We will share.
So we want to get our students from constantly being content consumers, which is very easy in today's age with YouTube and Netflix, and push them over to the creator side. So when we do project-based learning, we're not looking at getting all of our students to do the exact same project, but we're thinking about how can we get students to create something based on what they learn, because we know that when they're actually doing something with the knowledge, that's when it sticks. A lot more than just memorizing for a multiple choice test, taking it and moving on to the next content.
Guys, we have a 10 microliters of the DNA you just extracted and put it in the middle well.
We have evidence from many, many studies that students who engage in authentic learning and inquiry-based learning do as well as others on standardized tests and do much better on real assessments and real tasks of critical thinking and problem solving.
So this is a great video. We're not going to show the whole thing just for the sake of time, but from Edutopia about how project-based learning actually taps into the science of learning, curiosity, inquiry, students asking questions and then trying to find out the answers. This is how actual real learning happens, not just memorization for the next test, but something more meaningful and something that sticks with them after they've left our classroom.
So we have a few examples here. I'm just going to share one of them because I already talked about the weather example. So once we had Kevin Jeans come in and explain to us what a meteorologist does, we had to turn our students into meteorologists. So they each had a weather topic that they had to discuss. So we bought green screens because that's what the real weather reporters stand in front of. And I'll play a little snippet.
Live from the twin tornadoes in Oklahoma. It's happening now. The big questions that everybody's asking is, what is a tornado? What causes a tornado? How are tornadoes dangerous? How can you stay safe? And how can you predict a tornado?
As you heard, we're live streaming from Oklahoma. Now, if you don't know what a tornado is, get out of your car now. We have one because we have one going on right now. Now, tornadoes are cold air, dry air, and warm air mixed together. All of that air collides and makes a funnel cloud. When the funnel
All right, so
touches the ground, it is officially called a tornado. Fun fact: tornadoes have stronger winds than hurricanes, but hurricanes are bigger than tornadoes.
They could go all day.
So with that example, you can see that they had to create something, but it also had to display their knowledge of, they were each assigned a different subtopic in which to explain their knowledge.
All right, go back on the right screen. All right, so once you've gotten them to create something of value for the outside world, something like a video like that, something like a blog where they're sharing their writing online, or a podcast, or some other thing of value, a website with clickable links. We want them to actually give that learning, share that knowledge with the world, not just the classroom teacher. So the third part of our approach is to get students to teach others as experts to these authentic audiences. We've been talking for a long time about how important it is for students to have a voice, and I think that ties in really closely with what your conference is all about. It's about giving students the chance to be heard, to belong, to know that their voice is an important part of their classroom community. But we realized something. We realized that just having a voice in the classroom isn't always enough. We need to make sure that they have an authentic audience out in the world in order to create these mind-blowing, earth-shattering experiences. So connecting them with an authentic audience, whether it's their parents or the classroom down the hall or the expert that you learned from in the first place, giving them an audience is a really key part of this equation.
So when we say authentic, we mean someone that is important to the students, someone who is personal, someone who's engaged, and someone who is interested in what they have to say.
There's a great quote that kind of spurred a lot of our thinking about this that comes from Rushton Hurley, and we share it everywhere we go. He says, if students are sharing their work with the world, they want it to be good. But if they're just sharing it with you, the classroom teacher, they want it to be good enough. And I'll give you a really quick example of this. My students had just finished up writing their third personal narrative story, which is like a small moment from their lives. We had taken these from the drafting phase to the revision phase. They've edited it to check for capitalization and spelling and punctuation, all of this stuff. They've typed it. And then I announced to them that we were going to actually be inviting the entire school to watch them give a recitation of their narratives on Zoom live, and that we'd also be inviting their parents. And I had a boy in the first row of my classroom kind of look like he had just seen a ghost. His face went pale and kind of got sweaty. He said, well, I need to add more details to my story if we're going to be sharing this with the whole school. And I said, that's what we've been trying to do this whole time, the whole writing process. But when students actually understand that their work is going to go beyond the walls of your classroom, it makes a big difference in the amount of pride that they take in it and the amount of effort that they put into it.
Another benefit when we do these kind of things is it pushes students a little bit outside of their comfort zone. When they, like in elementary school, have one classroom teacher who's reading their work the whole year, they kind of get in that complacency zone where when they know they're sharing it to parents or to other students around the school, it really pushes them to want to get better and want to do that work. So we always think that's important too.
So we're looking for authentic audiences, whether it's near to home at the school or far, using the technology. We like to leverage technology in order to give them an even wider audience. So we'll share a couple of examples.
So one very simple example, this is a few years ago, was during social studies presentation. I just had Grayson's class come down and be the audience for my students' presentations that day. And it just added, this was in March, so by that time they've been presenting to their own classmates for so many months now, that just adding other kids, this is when we both taught 4th grade, so other kids in their grade level to see theirs, and then we went and watched some of their presentations as well.
So like I said, after we finished up writing those narrative stories, we had a day where we invited the whole school to hear them. We made it a big deal. We made it an experience that they'll remember. We had cider, we had donuts, and then we had the Zoom link for parents in the school to join, and kids were able to read their stories out loud. Some of these pictures are pre-pandemic, some of them are after, but because it's something that we've continued as a tradition.
And then a big project that we've done in the past is Entrepreneur Day, in which we teach our students, we can read about what it's like to make a business, or we can kind of get students to live that. So in this, we connected our students with local entrepreneurs, and also we even had the company Flipgrid Skype in with our class and talk to them about the entrepreneurial process. But we kind of created this project as a Shark Tank Junior, we called it. So they had to create a business or service that they could sell in the cafeteria to all of these people. And then the big bad sharks on the right had to go around and give them feedback and critique on their business plan. So instead of them reading about the entrepreneurial process, they lived through the entrepreneurial process.
Another one that we love to have our students engage in every year is called the Cardboard Challenge. And this was inspired by a boy named Kane, who lived in Southern California. His dad owned a used car parts, automotive parts store. And he was there every day over the summer, all by himself, with just people coming in, buying these parts and leaving. And he took those boxes that all these auto parts had come in, and he actually turned it into something amazing. He started to build arcade games. And since then, this has become a international movement where kids take cardboard and they show their STEM skills and they create something of value for the world. And then they get to welcome people to play their games and experience it and get feedback on how the game was actually played.
We did that this year. We couldn't do it last year because we were on Zoom, but I did it this year. And on the first day of school, we've done this in the past. I had a student who came in, and on the first day of school, he said, I love building stuff with cardboard. Are we doing the cardboard challenge this year? So this is someone who experienced it on the other side and has been looking forward to it for that amount of time.
So those are a couple of examples at school, but we can also reach out beyond the walls of our classroom. Like we said, we like to use Skype, Zoom. We're big on Twitter, sharing the work of our students, sharing pictures of what's going on in our classroom. Flipgrid is great for classrooms to connect with each other. Seesaw is a wonderful way for parents to see it as a window into your classroom. Podcasting has a global reach, and so do websites. So we'll share a couple examples of those.
So when I taught 3rd grade many years ago, this is the first time Seesaw came out and kind of like opened my eyes to this global connections thing. So we wrote these essays, and it got posted on Seesaw, which was the first time I'd used Seesaw. Had kids post something, the parents were all connected and could see it. And then a girl the next day came running in, and she was like so excited about what was going to tell me something. She's like, you're never going to believe what happened. And then she went on to say, since her writing was on Seesaw, her grandma read it. And at first I didn't think that was that big of a revelation. And she said, my grandma lives in India and she's never seen any of my schoolwork before. And I said, well, how? She's not connected to our Seesaw. And she told me her dad took the link from it and posted it to Facebook because he was proud of it. And her grandma and aunts and uncles who lived in a different country were able to read it that same in real time and give that exposure. And I can tell you that her writing the rest of the year was elevated, knowing that it wasn't just myself reading a piece of paper inside of a bin in my classroom.
So here's another example. Part of our nonfiction writing units include having students create books. And one great app to use is Book Creator. We had students doing research about slavery and the Civil War and the fight to keep the country together. We were doing it, but also all the other classes around the district were doing it at the same time, and we knew that. So what we did is we had students export their books that they had created from Book Creator as a video, upload it to this app called Flipgrid, and then we invited other classes from around the district to upload their books as well. And then kids were actually able to read each other's books from across our school district, kids that they had never met, kids that they would probably never meet. And the level of engagement went up exponentially.
So my favorite part of this picture, it's really small up here in the top corner. It says the engagement. It says 132.9 hours of engagement on this Flipgrid. And I can promise you, if the assignment was to take your book home and read it to your parents, the level of engagement would have been like 5 minutes per student. So this just shows that they were going home. When we did this, I remember specifically, I left notifications on, and I got like 170 emails that night from every video that was posted in response to people, which does not normally happen after hours.
Right.
So another thing that I've done for 3 years now, this is one of my favorite projects by far that I've ever done, is I started a Clasroom podcast. The first group who I did this with, I think, are 7th graders now. And our driving question for this project, it's changed a little bit over the past few years, but it's how can we use technology to positively impact the world? So our podcast, it's called the 4th Grade Innovators Podcast. It's available on all Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, any podcast platform. We use the tool Anchor to do it. We spread messages about growth mindset, positivity. We've done special edition New Year's resolutions, getting out of our comfort zone. We've also did an episode last year that I really loved on innovation, and the kids kind of did that thinking of what are the jobs going to be like in the future and what skills are people going to need to fill these jobs. And they put out a whole like report as a class on the future and those kind of things. So in our Classroom podcast, I just looked at it this morning, we just crossed over 4,000 views from 39 different countries around the world. And we have not done an episode since like May of last year. We haven't gotten into it this year. But we still had like 13 people who listened in the past week to something that I haven't tweeted about or advertised on. It's still getting found. And when you tell students that, that's what gets them excited to come to school, excited to research a topic when they can see that it's reaching all of these places. Hello, and welcome to the 4th Grade Innovators Podcast. This is your host, Mr. Zach Rondo, and each week I will bring you messages from some of the most brilliant and inspiring people I know, my 4th grade students. Through this podcast, we aim to inspire, motivate, and make a positive impact on the world. Thanks for listening.
Hello, welcome to episode 1.
At the beginning of this year,
So you can see kids are excited about it. It's having a real world impact, and their voices are being heard outside of the 4 walls of your classroom. When my 5th graders found out that Mr. Rondo's 4th graders were creating a podcast, we couldn't be left behind. So we had to have our own take on this, this platform. And so we tied it into what we had been doing with journalism. I mentioned that we were trying to learn from journalists and become journalists. We even published a school newspaper for a few episodes, but then it kind of stopped. And we thought, maybe how can we take our voices from the classroom and go beyond our school, so that the things that students are writing, the ideas that they have, and the opinions that they have about things that they see are making it a bigger impact on the world. So we connected it to these in-depth articles that they were researching about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. And so we started creating episodes about ending poverty, creating more opportunities for renewable energy, and cleaning our oceans and cleaning our land. And we are also using that same platform, Anchor.fm. And if you search for the 5th Grade Futurists podcast, it will come up on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever. And I know that our students would love to have you listening.
Hi guys, welcome to Fun at School with Alexa and Olivia. Today we are going to be listing a couple of things that we learned from podcasting this year. In case you didn't know, our class is the 4th Grade Innovators Podcast. Woo! We aim to inspire, motivate, and make a positive impact on the world. So let's get started. Number 1, you get to share your voice with the world. Yahoo! 2, you get to inspire people. Woohoo! And 3, you get to teach people. Thanks for watching.
this was an unprompted video that was sent to me that these students came up with after we started podcasts, so I had to share that.
But it makes it exciting, makes school fun. So we want to share how this might go, and by sharing an example of how we put it all together. So this is going to be a picture of practice of how we got our students to learn from experts, become experts through project-based learning, and then how we had them teaching others as experts. So this was something that we called the Costello Developers Academy and Expo. And this all came from a field trip that Mr. Rondo and I took to Chicago with our school district superintendent and our principal, Dr. Tammy DePonio. A few years ago, we went to Chicago to visit the Apple executive headquarters. And we wanted to learn about Apple's approach to coding and to see how we could use coding as another one of those outlets for students to show things that they care about and for them to showcase their knowledge and talents. This was a quote that we heard while we were there from Seth Godin. He said, "Never again is someone going to pay you to give them answers they can look up online." And think about how many times during the school year, during your own education, you were quizzed on something that could have been Googled, or quizzed on something that the teacher already knew. Those kind of tests of quote unquote intelligence are no longer valid, no longer necessary. They will only pay you, he says, to solve problems that don't yet have answers. And that's really what we need our students coming out of school ready to do.
So we went to Apple, as he mentioned, and we went through this like training to figure out the coding academy, or the new coding curriculum that they were launching. And then they kind of challenged us to like, how could you pilot this new curriculum in your school? So we decided to come up with the Costello Developers Academy. This is like our adult thinking in our phase of going through this project a bit. So then we took it a step further and we took a field trip to Somerset Mall, and we went to, we kind of put two companies against each other. We went to the Microsoft store and the Apple store, and the Apple store had this app design prototype, and they, sitting in the Apple store, learning about app development is way cooler than a teacher who's reading it off of like a curriculum book, pretending that I know how to code an app. So it's hearing from real people. So we learned from experts at the field trip.
And then the next stage was to become experts through our own project-based learning. So we had our students using two main platforms. One was Tinker, and the other one was the CodeSpark Academy. And in doing this, it was taking them through some basic ideas of coding, using if-then statements, using loops, using all of the sequential thinking that it takes to develop an app. Then they had to brainstorm. They had to identify a problem that they could see in the world, and then take that problem and think about what might be a possible solution through coding that I could create.
So one way we set this up was the driving question was, how could we create an app that could solve a problem in the world? Because we did not want to have, if we didn't give those constraints, we would have had 60 different games that they were trying to come up with. So we kind of tightened out that it had to make a positive impact in the world.
Right. So then we wanted to give them the chance to share everything that they had learned, what they had learned from the Apple store, the Microsoft store, from practicing this in the classroom with us, learning right alongside them, and then developing that app prototype.
So we invited high schoolers from Troy Athens High School's computer science program to come in and preview their apps and give feedback before our big show. And then in the big show, we set up a showcase in the cafeteria where they were showcasing their apps and their ideas to younger students around the school.
Extra goals that you can do, and these are the 17 global goals. And if you click on one of them, like gender equality, it would show another goal that could lead up to gender equality and could accomplish it.
So like we all made app prototypes, and we made like our posters with like reviews, the app description. There's a whole bunch of different types of apps. Like I saw an app right next to me which is kind of like Grubhub, is like you order food and it comes to you. I saw another one was like, I think it was like a car buying one, and then there's some that help the world. So there was a lot of different types of apps there.
Anybody can change the world through an app if they're an adult or just a kid. They can study, they can code, they can learn to code, and they can soon be able to develop their own app. And I think that everybody should at least try to learn code. You don't have to develop an app, but you can try and learn code.
Just to tell you, some of the adults in the video you saw would have been our superintendent, school board members, our district technology coordinator, our district technology leader in the whole district. So all of these different pieces in audience to bring into that strategically and thoughtfully.
So Trevor Muir is a friend and colleague of ours. He's a professor at Grand Valley State University, and he actually wrote the foreword to our book. But he says this: when we treat learners as potential experts and give them opportunities to do real work that actually matters, they can excel in ways they never could in a traditional school format. So that's kind of, I think, why we were invited to share some of the things that we've done today, because when kids are engaged and excited and looking forward to the next opportunity to be an expert and share what they know, it makes school a joyful place. It makes learning a joyful place for the kids and for the teachers. And it's just been a really special experience.
So some parting advice, we'll say start small. Don't think that you have to create a podcast tomorrow. Like see how you can connect with buddy classes or classmates or the parents or principal, PTO. Central office people love getting out of their offices.
Then you can step it up, look for those cross-district connections, connecting fifth graders that you know are at your school with fifth graders at a building across the district. Send out those whole school invitations, and it's okay to take a risk, right? That's where the magic happens, when you step out of your comfort zone as well. So invite other teachers into your classroom to see what your kids are doing. Reach out to local government officials, your city council or your state representative. And teacher friends in other parts of the country are very understanding as well, and that would be a good way to get a further reach.
And then you can dream big by using hashtags on Twitters or handles to connect with people, or doing virtual field trips, asking an expert to Skype in with you or Zoom in with you.
Right.
And again, don't be afraid to ask. So we have to leave you with the side effects. After getting you all excited, you have to know the side effects, or the expert effect is that students will get this selective perfectionism, where they want their work to be awesome and great. They will have a deep love for learning, high engagement. They'll be empowered learners. They'll get excited to come to school, all of which makes a better environment for us as classroom teachers.
So thank you very much for inviting us today, for letting us be a part of this awesome conference on kindness and stopping bullying, stopping all of the negative things from happening, and making school a positive and joyful place. We'd love to connect with you. So if you want to take a screenshot, we'll just leave that there for a minute, or check out our podcast. And then Zach's also got a blog, zachrondot.com, and we've done some writing together at innovationforeducation.wordpress.com as well.
I think those are awesome side effects. I guess if you're going to have side effects, let's have some good side effects out of your work. So your work has just been sounds awesome, and I just love that the students are involved and going forward. We do have some questions for you and keep ourselves on time, but I do want to let you know that Nikki in North Dakota wants you to know she's used your podcast in her 4th grade class. Toro says this is just great ideas. And we had one from Lauren in Montgomery, says she's just got your book. It's amazing. Can't wait to use it in her class next year. So
awesome.
Kudos to you guys for coming up with something. The entrepreneurs teaching kids to be entrepreneurs. Awesome. So A couple questions for you. Let's start at the very top. How did you get support from admin to approve this when everybody's under the microscope? This is from DJ and Kentwood, to do something so different.
It actually, so it's funny, the reason that Zach and I have been so linked and like-minded about this is because a number of years ago, our principal had visited a school in around St. Louis, I believe, where she's originally from. And she came back all excited. She had the literature of the school, how they had developed not just classrooms, but they called them learning labs, and where they had teachers co-teaching with another colleague, and having these, an inquiry-based curriculum, basically. And she came back and was excited. And we are the kind of people who will just jump in with both feet. We don't read the instruction manual. We're just going to try it and see how it goes. And so we actually co-taught for a year with the wall between our classroom removed. We had 56 fourth graders all in one big room. And we just it was a sink or swim moment. But the feedback that we got from parents and the feedback that we got from kids, and the just the opportunities to try new things, having a partner right there was game changing. It kind of allowed us to take those risks, knowing that we had a fallback. We had another person we could rely on. So I would say that the feedback from parents and students about the amazing opportunities and just the climate of our classroom just made a difference. You could tell something special was happening. And after that, a couple of other classrooms from around our district tried out the co-teaching model, and we've just been sharing that message.
We also have a really supportive superintendent, and one year he challenged us to take a risk and to fail at something. And at the end of his presentation, he gave us a card that says, like, this is your free pass. I think we both stashed a couple extra in our pockets and used those risks. So we do have a supportive administration who encourages us and helps brainstorm some of these ideas as well.
But in Kentwood, you could buy our book and buy a copy for your principal and show them all the awesome things that could be possible.
How do you get also buy-in from parents who may think that they're really into traditional learning? This is from Nicole. They want to do that. And then I'm going to tie bar that is also, how do you get parent support with all this going out over social media?
Those are, really good questions. A comment that has always come up to me at parent teacher conferences, or, the open houses that we have, or the events that we invite parents to, is that kids are talking about what they're doing in school over dinner, which is not something, if they weren't excited about it, it wouldn't be happening. The question of what did you do in school today? Or how was school today? The answer would be, it was fine, or okay. But when kids are excited about it and they're looking forward to the next big thing and saying, hey, I got to meet Rick Riordan today in a virtual thing, it makes a difference in how kids are going home and talking about school. I think parents can pick up on that. And again, it's the meaningful, deep learning. It's not just the surface memorization. It's the big ideas and preparing them for a future that we didn't have when we were coming out of school, and their parents didn't have either. So
one thing I do before our podcast is I send home a permission slip for parents in order for them to sign off that it's okay. And one thing I find funny is when they send home class t-shirt order forms, you're sending second and third notices. When I send home a podcast permission slip, I had 98% of students turn it in the next day. So you knew if they're running home excited talking about it, the parents are pretty happy to be on board with it.
Yeah. How do you go about getting, you mentioned a little bit, but how do you go about getting your guest speakers? I think that's an awesome thing. I'm sure people that are watching, hey, I volunteer. It's a great thing to kind of be able to share knowledge. So
there's definitely a few different ways. One really is just kind of leveraging your network of all the parents in your class. We've had times, Grayson had a student whose aunt worked at the National Weather Center, and we were doing weather, and they kind of made the connection for us. Cold emailing and asking works quite often. And then also a lot of times these things, he did not have Rick Riordan speaking directly to his class. It was a multi-point webinar. So if you look for those big webinars that are already happening, and Flipgrid is putting a lot of those out right now, that tie in, or Googling virtual field trips on World War II museum. You'll probably find one that, especially now, they're doing so many of these virtual field trips. It's come
Right.
so long in the past, 2 years now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. I think it's fascinating. I loved how you spelled out expert. Apologies to the real writers in our midst, but that's okay. But I think, a lot of people are called experts, but that's a great way to kind of phrase what an expert is. So thank you guys for what you're doing for your students and sharing that with everybody here. So if we get, appreciate your expertise today. Excellent info, Grayson and Zach. So we got that from the internet. So even more internet praise for you guys. So, but thank you for sharing.
Thank you. It's been a
today.
pleasure chatting with you all today.
Thanks.
All right.